Maybe you should try harder to fit in. Darlene Whitcomb's voice carried across the empty classroom, her hand resting on a stack of perfectly organized lesson plans. 23 years teaching at Oakwood Elementary. Tenure. Untouchable. The other children have been complaining about your hair and those lunches you bring. Perhaps something more appropriate? Imani Thornton sat perfectly still in the child-sized chair, her 8-year-old hands folded in her lap. Black skin. Braids adorned with yellow beads that clicked when she moved. Former foster child. Adopted just 2 years ago by one of the wealthiest men in the city. What Darlene Whitcomb did next would destroy not just one child's innocence, but expose a conspiracy of silence that had poisoned Oakwood Elementary for over 2 decades. Comment where you're listening from. Subscribe to channel. Let me tell you who Imani Thornton really was. Before Caleb Thornton walked into that children's home on a cold February morning in 2023, Imani had lived in 7 different foster homes. 7. By the age of 6. Each placement lasted anywhere from 3 months to a year before something happened. Budget cuts, family emergencies, foster parents who just couldn't handle her anymore, though Imani never caused trouble. She was too quiet for trouble. Too careful, too aware that one wrong move meant another cardboard box, another car ride, another new bed in another stranger's house. The social workers wrote in her file, Imani exhibits signs of selective mutism and attachment disorder. Recommend therapeutic intervention and stable long-term placement. What they didn't write. Imani taught herself to read by age 4, using discarded newspapers she found in foster home recycling bins. She could do multiplication in her head before anyone taught her the times tables. She memorized the Lord's Prayer after hearing it once at a church service she'd attended with her 3rd foster family, and she whispered it every night into her pillow, believing that somewhere, someone was listening. Here's what nobody knew. Imani's biological mother, Keisha Thornton, had died when Imani was 3 years old. Keisha had been a teacher's aide at a school in the same district as Oakwood Elementary. She'd worked there for 5 years, beloved by students, respected by colleagues, until she raised concerns about how black and brown children were being disciplined differently than white students, how their complaints were dismissed while white parents' emails got immediate responses, how funding for after-school programs in predominantly black neighborhoods kept getting cut while white suburban schools got new computer labs. Keisha documented everything: spreadsheets, emails, recorded meetings. She was building a case to present to the school board. 2 weeks before her scheduled presentation, Keisha was killed in a hit-and-run accident 3 blocks from Oakwood Elementary. The driver was never found. The case went cold. And all of Keisha's documentation disappeared from her work computer the night she died. The police ruled it an accident. A tragedy. Move on. Imani didn't remember any of this. She was too young. The foster system took her before anyone could tell her about her mother's fight for justice. Before anyone could tell her that Keisha Thornton had been trying to change the very system that would later swallow her daughter whole. That was her mother's first mistake, thinking documentation would protect her. When Caleb Thornton, self-made tech CEO worth $43 million, decided to adopt a child, he didn't want an infant. He wanted someone old enough to talk to teach, to share his life with. The social worker showed him Imani's photo. Big brown eyes, neat braids, a smile that looked like it was trying very hard to be brave. She's special, the social worker said. Very bright, just needs stability. Caleb fell in love the moment he met her. This tiny person who asked him if he liked books, who shook his hand with such careful formality, who looked at him like she was afraid he might disappear if she blinked too hard. The adoption took 6 months. Background checks, home visits, court hearings. And then one day in August 2023, Imani Thornton moved into Caleb's 4-bedroom house in the affluent West Hills neighborhood with her single cardboard box of belongings and a stuffed giraffe missing one eye. Caleb promised her that night, "You're home now, sweetheart. Nobody's going to take you away. You're safe." Imani wanted to believe him. She really did. But safety, she was learning, was something other children got to have. Oakwood Elementary stood like a brick fortress in the heart of the district's wealthiest neighborhood. Manicured lawns, parent-funded art studio, a library that smelled like new books and furniture polish, 92% white enrollment, 7% Asian, 1% Black and Latino combined. Imani was the only Black girl in her 3rd grade class. On her first day in September 2024, Caleb walked her to the classroom door, his hand warm and reassuring on her shoulder. "You're going to do great," he said, kneeling down to her level. "If you need anything, I'm just a phone call away." Imani nodded. She'd practiced her smile in the mirror that morning. Not too big, not too small. Just right. Just enough to seem friendly without seeming like she wanted anything. What she didn't know was that Principal Gerald P. Lockage had already received a call that morning from 3 parents. 3 white parents whose children were in Imani's class. They wanted to know about the new student. They wanted to make sure their children wouldn't be negatively impacted. They wanted assurances that standards would be maintained. Principal Lockage assured them. Of course, absolutely. Oakwood Elementary prided itself on excellence. No child would receive special treatment. That was his first mistake. Thinking they were talking about academics. The first week was fine. Imani sat quietly at her desk, completed her assignments early, raised her hand when she knew answers, which was often. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, seemed pleasantly surprised. "Well done, Imani," she'd say, though her voice carried a note of something Imani couldn't quite identify. Surprise? Relief? The second week, things shifted. It started small. A girl named Madison wrinkled her nose when Imani opened her lunchbox. "What is that smell?" Imani looked down at her lunch. Jollof rice that Caleb had learned to make from their neighbor, Miss Ada. He'd been so proud that morning, showing her how he'd gotten the spices just right. "It's rice," Imani said softly. "It's weird," Madison announced to the table. "My mom makes normal food." The other children giggled. Imani closed her lunchbox. She wasn't hungry anymore anyway. That afternoon, during art class, a boy named Trevor asked loudly, "Why is her hair like that? It looks like rope." Mrs. Patterson glanced up from grading papers. "Trevor, that's not appropriate." But her voice lacked conviction, and she returned to her work without making him apologize or move seats or face any consequence at all. Imani touched her braids. Caleb had spent an hour that morning watching YouTube tutorials, his large hands working carefully to create neat plaits adorned with the beads she'd chosen. Yellow, because yellow was happy. She didn't touch her braids anymore that day. Or the next. Or the next. By week 3, a pattern had emerged. When Imani raised her hand, Mrs. Patterson called on her less and less. When she finished assignments early, instead of praise, she received extra work. "To keep you busy," Mrs. Patterson explained with a tight smile. During recess, the other children played together while Imani stood by the fence, watching. Once, she approached a group of girls jumping rope. "Can I play?" They looked at each other. Madison spoke for the group. "We already have enough people." There were 3 of them. The rope required 2. Math was Imani's best subject. She went back to the fence. In the cafeteria, things were worse, much worse. Mini cliffhanger. Darlene Whitcomb took over cafeteria duty in October. Budget cuts meant fewer staff, so teachers rotated through lunch supervision. Darlene took the assignment seriously. She believed in maintaining order, maintaining standards, making sure these children understood how to behave in civilized society. She noticed Imani immediately, the only dark face in a sea of pale ones, the child who sat alone, while others clustered in groups, the girl who ate strange-smelling food and wore her hair in styles Darlene had only seen in magazines about ethnic culture. Darlene watched as children walked past Imani's table, making comments just loud enough to hear. Silent girl. Charity case. Why doesn't she ever talk? Bet her dad adopted her to look good. And Darlene watched, just watched. Occasionally she'd call out, "Inside voices, children," when the cafeteria got too loud. But she never addressed the specific comments, never moved to sit with Imani, never asked if anyone was bothering her. Because, Darlene reasoned, children needed to learn to handle social situations on their own. Coddling them wouldn't help. The real world was tough. Better they learn now. That's what she told herself. That's what they all told themselves. The truth they buried for years ran much deeper. Oakwood Elementary had a reputation to maintain. 97% of their students went on to prestigious middle schools. 99% college acceptance rate for those who continued through the district's high school. Parent satisfaction scores in the 98th percentile. These numbers mattered. They attracted wealthy families. They secured funding. They meant teachers could demand higher salaries, and administrators could point to results when the school board questioned anything. And those results depended on a very specific type of student population. Families who donated to fundraisers, parents who volunteered for committees, children who fit the culture, the unspoken culture. The white, upper-middle class, don't-make-waves culture that Oakwood Elementary had cultivated for 43 years. When Caleb Thornton enrolled his daughter, Principal Lockage saw an opportunity. Caleb's net worth was public knowledge. His tech company had just secured a $30 million funding round. He was exactly the type of parent Oakwood wanted. Wealthy, influential, connected. The fact that his daughter was black was a complication, but Lockage reasoned they could manage it. One child. What difference could one child make? What he didn't account for was that Imani wouldn't stay silent forever. By November, Imani had stopped eating lunch at school entirely. She'd open her lunchbox, look at the food Caleb had carefully prepared, and quietly close it again. At home, she'd eat normally, but at school, surrounded by comments and wrinkled noses and, "You, what is that?" her stomach clenched too tight to swallow. Caleb noticed her lunchbox coming home full. "Not hungry today, sweetheart?" "Not really," Imani would say. Always the same answer. Always that careful, measured tone. She'd also stopped participating in class discussions. When Mrs. Patterson called on her now, Imani would freeze, her carefully practiced words evaporating under the weight of 23 pairs of eyes staring at her, judging her, waiting for her to mess up. "Imani, do you know the answer?" Silence. "Imani, I know you know this. We talked about it yesterday." More silence. Imani's throat closing around words that wouldn't come. "Well, if you're not going to participate..." Mrs. Patterson would sigh and call on someone else. The other children learned quickly. Imani doesn't talk. Imani is weird. Imani doesn't belong. At home, Imani began a new ritual. Every night before bed, after Caleb tucked her in and read her a story, after he kissed her forehead and turned off the light, Imani would kneel beside her bed. "Dear God," she whispered into the darkness. "Please help me be strong tomorrow at school. Please help me remember that different isn't bad. Please help the other kids understand. Please. Her voice would trail off, because what she really wanted to pray was, please make it stop. Please make them like me. Please make me invisible so they'll leave me alone. But Imani had learned in 7 foster homes that asking for too much meant you got nothing at all. What happened next would change everything. December brought the school's winter pageant. Every class performed something. Mrs. Patterson's 3rd grade was doing a reading of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," with each child reading 1 stanza. Imani practiced her stanza every night. She had it memorized perfectly. She'd stand in front of her bedroom mirror, watching herself, making sure her voice was clear, her posture straight, her smile just right. Caleb helped her pick out a dress. Velvet and green, like Christmas trees. He took a dozen photos before they left for the school. "You're going to be amazing," he said. And for a moment, in the safety of their car, Imani believed him. The auditorium was packed with parents. Caleb found a seat near the middle, his phone ready to record his daughter's moment. He watched the 1st and 2nd grades perform, smiled at the kindergartners' chaotic jingle bell presentation, waited for Imani's class. When the 3rd graders filed onto stage, Caleb spotted Imani immediately. She stood in the 2nd row, that green velvet dress making her easy to find. Her hands were clasped in front of her posture perfect. Mrs. Patterson stood to the side with a microphone, introducing each child. "Now, Madison will read the next stanza." Madison stepped forward, read her lines clearly, returned to her spot. Applause. "Trevor will read the next stanza." Trevor stepped forward, stumbled over a word, laughed, read it again correctly, returned to his spot. Bigger applause. "And now Sarah will read the next stanza." "Wait." Caleb sat forward. Sarah's stanza was after Imani's. He checked the program. Yes, Imani was supposed to read before Sarah. He watched as Sarah read, as another child read. As the pageant continued and Imani remained in the 2nd row, hands still clasped, posture still perfect, lips not moving at all. Mrs. Patterson had skipped her. Completely. Pretended she wasn't even there. Caleb's hands tightened on his phone. Around him, other parents clapped and cheered for their children. Nobody seemed to notice. Nobody cared that one little girl in a green velvet dress had practiced for weeks for a moment that never came. When the pageant ended, Caleb waited outside Imani's classroom. She emerged with the other children, saw him, and her carefully maintained smile finally cracked. "I forgot my lines," she whispered. "What?" "Mrs. Patterson asked me this morning if I was ready, and I said yes. But then she said maybe it would be better if Sarah did my part, too, just in case I forgot during the show. And I said, okay." Caleb knelt down, his heart breaking. "Sweetheart, you knew those lines perfectly." "Mrs. Patterson said I seemed nervous. She said it was okay. Lots of children get stage fright." Imani's voice was barely audible. "She said she was just trying to protect me from embarrassment." This is when everything changed. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment. Imani's face when she realized she'd been skipped. Mrs. Patterson's casual dismissal disguised as protection. The way none of the other parents noticed, or if they did, didn't care. He'd been telling himself that Imani was just adjusting, that she was shy, that starting a new school was hard for any child, let alone one who'd been through the foster system. But this was different. This was deliberate. The next morning, Caleb made a decision. He cleared his schedule, told his assistant he was taking a personal day, and at 11:45 a.m., he drove to Oakwood Elementary. The secretary barely looked up when he signed in. "Here for lunch with your daughter? Lots of parents do that around the holidays." Caleb took his visitor's badge and walked toward the cafeteria. The sound of children's voices grew louder. He paused at the door, taking a breath, and stepped inside. The cafeteria was chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Children at tables, teachers monitoring from the sides, the smell of pizza and chocolate milk and hand sanitizer. And there, near the back wall, sitting completely alone at a table meant for 6, was Imani. Caleb found a spot against the wall where he could see her without being seen. Watched as she went through the lunch line, her movements careful and small, like she was trying not to take up space. Watched as she carried her tray to that empty table. Then he heard it. Look who it is. Silent girl. A cluster of children at a nearby table, pointing, giggling. Hey, Thornton, why don't you ever talk? Cat got your tongue? Imani's shoulders hunched. She didn't respond. Didn't look up. Just sat down and started arranging her food with precise, deliberate movements. What's in your lunch today? Bet it's weird like yesterday. More laughter. Caleb's hands clenched. But he didn't move. He needed to see. Needed to understand the full scope. A girl with blonde pigtails walked past Imani's table. Those braids look like spider legs. And what kind of last name is Thornton for someone like her, anyway? That's when Caleb saw Darlene Whitcomb. She stood about 15 feet away, near the trash bins, looking directly at the interaction. She saw the children mocking Imani, heard every word, and did nothing. She glanced down at her phone, scrolled, glanced back up, then walked in the opposite direction toward a group of teachers at the far wall. Caleb felt something hot and hard settle in his chest. This wasn't neglect. This was choice. Active choice to ignore what was happening right in front of her. Mini cliffhanger. Someone bumped into Imani from behind. Not quite accidentally. Her tray shifted. Water sloshed onto her sleeve, darkening the fabric of her carefully pressed uniform. Oops, came the mock-innocent voice. Didn't see you there. You're so quiet, you're practically invisible. Imani stood very still. Caleb could see her chin trembling, could see her hands tighten on her tray, could see her fighting every instinct to cry or run or scream. And then, across the cafeteria, their eyes met. Imani saw her father, saw him watching, and something crossed her face. Not relief. Fear. Fear that he'd seen this. Fear of what it meant that he knew. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. Please don't. Please don't make it worse. Please let me handle this. His 8-year-old daughter was begging him not to rescue her because she'd learned that rescue meant being the problem. Meant being the one who couldn't handle normal kid interactions. Meant proving everyone right about her not belonging. Caleb forced himself to stay still. To honor her silent plea. To watch as she finished her lunch in that corner, as children continued their casual cruelty, as adults continued their casual blindness. When the lunch bell rang, students filed out. Imani dumped more than half her lunch in the trash and disappeared into the crowd. Caleb remained in the cafeteria long after it emptied, sat down at that table where his daughter had eaten alone, ran his hand across the surface, and tried to imagine doing this every day. Being 8 years old and facing this every day. His phone buzzed, work emails, meeting reminders, the world continuing like normal. But nothing was normal anymore. That afternoon, Caleb went straight to the school's administrative office. I need to see Principal Lockage. The secretary checked her computer. He's available at 3:30. Would you like to schedule? I'll wait. At 3:35, Gerald P. Lockage emerged from his office, his smile practiced and professional. Mr. Thornton, what a pleasant surprise. Please come in. Lockage's office screamed authority. Degrees on every wall, a desk too large for the space, chairs positioned so visitors sat slightly lower, literally looking up at him. I was at lunch today, Caleb said without preamble. I watched children mock my daughter. I watched a teacher ignore it completely. Lockage's smile didn't waver. I see. And which teacher was this? Darlene Whitcomb. Ah, yes, Mrs. Whitcomb, one of our most experienced staff members, 23 years here at Oakwood. Lockage leaned forward, hands clasped. Mr. Thornton, I understand you're concerned, but children at this age are learning to navigate social relationships. Sometimes what appears to adults as bullying is really just social adjustment. Social adjustment. Caleb's voice was flat. My daughter sits alone every day. Children mock her food, her hair, her very existence, and your teacher scrolls through her phone. Now, bullying is quite a serious accusation. Lockage's tone shifted, just slightly. Warning. What we've observed are normal social dynamics. Children this age can be exclusive, yes, but they're learning. We've made significant accommodations already. The lunch seating arrangements, the support programs you've generously sponsored. There it was. The reminder. You're a donor. You've been welcomed here. Don't bite the hand. We must be careful, Lockage continued, not to create an oversensitive environment. Sometimes well-meaning parents can inadvertently escalate situations that would naturally resolve themselves. The threat was subtle but clear. Push too hard, and things get worse for Imani. The school would brand her as the problem child whose father couldn't let normal social development happen. Caleb stood. I appreciate your time. Lockage's smile returned. We all want what's best for the children. I'm sure you'll consider carefully how to proceed. Our experienced educators have guided thousands of students through these developmental stages. Walking to his car, Caleb understood with crushing clarity. This wasn't about one teacher or one principal. This was systemic, carefully designed, perfectly maintained. And it was about to get much worse. What Caleb didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Imani's story was connected to something much bigger, something that had been buried for 21 years. When Caleb got home that evening, he found Imani at the kitchen table, homework spread out in careful organization. She looked up with that practiced smile. How was your day, Daddy? Good, sweetheart. How was yours? Fine. The lie sat between them like a third presence at the table. That night, after dinner, after homework, after bath time, Caleb tucked Imani into bed, read her favorite story about a brave princess, kissed her forehead. As he reached for the light switch, he heard it, that whispered prayer he'd heard before, but never really listened to. Dear God, please help me be strong tomorrow at school. Please help me remember what Daddy says about being strong on the inside. And please help the other kids understand that different isn't bad. She wasn't praying to be rescued. She was praying for courage to endure. Caleb stood in her doorway for a long time after she fell asleep, watching his daughter's peaceful face in the glow of her nightlight, thinking about what he'd witnessed, about Lockage's veiled threats, about the systematic way Imani had been made invisible. He'd built a $43 million company from nothing, had navigated corporate warfare, hostile takeovers, cutthroat competition. He knew power, knew how to wield it. But standing in his daughter's doorway, listening to her quiet breathing, he realized his power meant nothing if he didn't use it to protect her. The next morning, Caleb canceled every meeting, every obligation, everything. Family emergency, he told his assistant. Reschedule it all. He spent the entire day in the school district's administrative building, requesting records. Under FERPA regulations, he had the right to review Imani's educational records. All of them. The district clerk looked nervous. This will take some time to compile, Mr. Thornton. I'll wait. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of sitting in an uncomfortable chair while files were printed, compiled, organized. Finally, a stack of manila folders landed on the table in front of him. "These are all the records we have for Imani Thornton, currently enrolled in 3rd grade at Oakwood Elementary." Caleb opened the first folder. Standard enrollment forms, health records, academic assessments showing above-grade level performance in every subject. Then he found the incident reports. September 18th. Student reported feeling excluded at recess. Peer mediation conducted. Situation monitored. September 29th. Student expressed concern about lunch table comments. Teacher spoke with class about kindness. No further action required. October 7th. Student mentioned feeling uncomfortable when peers touched hair. Suggested student could wear different hairstyle to avoid drawing attention. October 15th. Student appeared withdrawn during group project. Teacher encouraged more social engagement. Situation resolved. October 23rd. Student reported classmate made comment about her skin color. Investigation found children were discussing art class color mixing. Cultural misunderstanding addressed. Page after page, incident after incident, and every single resolution followed the same pattern. Minimized, dismissed, blamed on Imani's sensitivity or misunderstanding. Caleb pulled out his laptop, created a spreadsheet, started documenting. Date, chakusur, incident, reporter, resolution, chertsos. Follow up as he worked, a pattern emerged that made his blood run cold. Every complaint from a black or brown student. Misunderstanding, oversensitivity, peer mediation, situation monitored. Every complaint from a white student. Investigation conducted, disciplinary action taken, parents contacted, policy review initiated. The disparity wasn't subtle. It was stark, documented, undeniable. And Imani wasn't the only one. Caleb found records for 3 other minority students who'd attended Oakwood in the past 5 years. All 3 had transferred out. All 3 had incident reports with the same dismissive language, the same lack of meaningful intervention. He dug deeper, requested anti-bullying policies, diversity training records, staff disciplinary files. What he found was a school that talked extensively about inclusion in its glossy brochures and parent newsletters, but whose actual practices told a different story entirely. Outdated diversity training materials from 2009, anti-bullying policies with vague language and no specific consequences, staff files showing 0 disciplinary actions for bias-related incidents in 15 years. This was intentional, systematic, protected. The truth they didn't want you to know ran even deeper. That evening, Caleb sat in his home office, surrounded by documents and printouts. His phone rang. His friend Marcus, another CEO who served on several school boards. "Heard you're making waves at Oakwood," Marcus said. "Word travels in these circles." "They're systematically mistreating minority kids, Marcus." "I believe you. I've seen it before." Marcus paused. "Look, there's an opening at Riverside Academy. Their diversity initiatives are actually meaningful. I could make a call, get Imani in there for next semester." Caleb rubbed his temples. "You think I should move her?" "I think sometimes the best thing for our kids is to get them somewhere safe. You can't fix every broken system, Caleb, but you can protect your daughter." It made sense. The logical solution? Move Imani to a better school. Let Oakwood continue its poisonous culture. Save his daughter, let the system roll on. But then he heard it. A small sound from the hallway. He turned. Imani stood there in her pink pajamas, eyes wide, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't make me leave," she whispered. Then louder, desperate. "I don't want to go to a new school. I don't want to start over. I can't." Caleb ended the call, crossed to his daughter in 3 quick strides. "Sweetheart, everyone always wants me to leave when things get hard." The words burst out of her. "I pray every night, Daddy. Not just to be brave, but I pray that someone will see what's happening, really see it, not just fix it by making me go away." She collapsed against him, sobs shaking her small frame. "I don't want to be rescued. I want things to change. Not just for me, for Jasmine too, and Marcus, and all the other kids who get treated different." Caleb held his daughter while she cried, felt the weight of every foster home, every time she'd been moved for being too much trouble, every time the solution to her problem had been to make her someone else's problem. "I don't want to be the kid who can't handle normal school," Imani said into his shoulder. "I don't want everyone to know I had to leave because I wasn't strong enough." "Oh, sweetheart." Caleb pulled back to look at her. "This has nothing to do with your strength. But if I leave, that's what everyone will think. That's what they'll say. That I couldn't fit in. That I was the problem." In that moment, looking at his 8-year-old daughter's tear-stained face, Caleb understood something profound. Imani wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking for justice, for accountability, for the system itself to change so other children wouldn't have to endure what she'd endured. "You're right," he said softly. "We're not running. We're standing. Together." Imani's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And Imani? Your prayers were answered. You are seen. By me. By God. And soon, by everyone who needs to see what's really happening here." That night, Caleb began drafting a document that would change everything. Subject: Formal complaint and request for district-wide investigation into discriminatory practices at Oakwood Elementary School. He attached his spreadsheet. Screenshots of incident reports, timeline of events, comparative analysis of how complaints were handled based on student race. Then he did something that would make him either a hero or a pariah in this community. He sent it not just to the school board, but to every parent in Oakwood Elementary's directory, to local media, to civil rights organizations, to education advocacy groups. The email went out at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. By 7:04 a.m. Wednesday, Caleb's phone was exploding. The backlash hit like a tsunami. Principal Lockage called first. His voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. "Mr. Thornton, I'm deeply disappointed. We could have resolved this internally. This kind of public spectacle helps no one, least of all your daughter." Translation: "You just painted a target on her back." Next came the school board president. "We take these allegations very seriously, of course, but the way you've gone about this, publicly, without giving us a chance to investigate privately, raises questions about your true motives." Translation: "You're a troublemaker looking for attention." Then the other parents started calling, emailing, confronting him in the school parking lot. "You're making this about race when it's not about race. My child has never seen any bullying. Imani seems like a nice girl, but maybe if she tried harder to fit in. This is damaging the school's reputation over one child's difficulty adjusting." The local newspaper ran a story. Tech CEO levels serious allegations at award-winning elementary school. The comments section was brutal. "This is what happens when rich people think their money entitles them to special treatment." His daughter probably is having trouble fitting in. That's not the school's fault. Crying racism is the new way to get attention. Oakwood Elementary is one of the best schools in the state. This man is trying to destroy it because his kid is having normal social struggles. Caleb watched the narrative shift in real time. He'd provided evidence, documentation, timeline, patterns, and somehow he'd become the villain. A local talk radio host invited Darlene Whitcomb on his show. She accepted. Caleb listened in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. "I've been a teacher for 23 years, Darlene said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I have dedicated my life to these children, all of them. To be accused of racism. when all I've ever done is try to help kids navigate difficult social situations." She actually cried on air. Real tears. The host rushed to comfort her. "It sounds like you're the real victim here," he said. "I just want to teach," Darlene sobbed. "I never wanted this kind of attention. I never wanted to hurt anyone." The narrative was set. Overzealous minority parent attacks beloved teacher. Rich outsider tries to bully school into giving his daughter special treatment. Political correctness gone mad. What happened next would prove them all wrong. Caleb's email had reached more people than just angry white parents and defensive administrators. It had reached Tanya Reeves. Tanya's son, Marcus, had attended Oakwood Elementary 3 years prior. He'd lasted 1 semester before Tanya pulled him out, unable to watch him become a shell of himself. She'd tried to raise concerns then, been politely dismissed, told that Marcus was having trouble with the adjustment and maybe needed different learning environment better suited to his needs. Translation: Your black son doesn't belong here. Tanya had kept every email, every dismissive response, every incident report that went nowhere. She'd kept them in a folder labeled Evidence because some part of her had always known this day would come. She forwarded everything to Caleb with a simple message. "You're not alone, and you're not crazy. I have 3 other families who will testify." Maria Gutierrez's daughter had been told to bring more American food to school. James Chen's twins had been mocked for their accents and told they should speak English at school. Sandra Williams's nephew had been repeatedly accused of cheating when he performed well on tests, with teachers saying they didn't expect that level of work from him. One by one, families came forward, families who'd been silent, who'd moved their children quietly, who'd been told the problem was their kids, not the school. Each family brought documentation, emails from teachers, incident reports, photos of racist messages their children had received from classmates. Caleb compiled it all, created a comprehensive dossier. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was undeniable. And then he found something that changed the entire trajectory of the case. In one of Tanya's old emails, there was a name he recognized, a teacher's aide who'd worked at Oakwood 21 years ago, a woman who'd raised similar concerns about discriminatory discipline and dismissive treatment of minority students. Keisha Thornton, Imani's biological mother. Caleb felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't just about Imani. This was about finishing what her mother had started, what her mother had died trying to expose. He hired a private investigator to dig into Keisha's case. What he found made him physically ill. Keisha had been building a presentation for the school board in 2004. She'd documented 3 years of discriminatory practices. She'd collected testimony from other staff members who'd witnessed bias. She'd prepared to blow the whistle on a system that protected white children while marginalizing students of color. 2 weeks before her scheduled presentation, Keisha died in a hit-and-run accident. The police report was cursory. Tragic accident, no witnesses, driver unknown. All of Keisha's documentation had disappeared from her work computer the night she died. Her personal files at home had been burglarized the following week. Nothing else was taken. Just her files. The investigator found one person willing to talk on record. Ruth Ann Sir, the cafeteria worker who'd been Keisha's friend, who'd helped her document incidents, who'd seen what happened to women who spoke up against Oakwood Elementary. "I wanted to testify back then," Ruth Ann said, her voice shaking. "But I was scared. I had 3 kids of my own to feed. They made it clear that anyone who supported Keisha's claims would lose their job. So I stayed quiet, and I've regretted it every single day since." Ruth Ann had watched Imani suffer in the cafeteria, had wanted to help but remembered what happened to the last person who tried to change the system. "When I saw your daughter," Ruth Ann told Caleb, "I saw Keisha, same quiet strength, same dignity, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not again. This is when Caleb made a choice that would cost everything. He called for a public forum, not a private meeting, not a behind-closed-doors negotiation, a public, on-record forum where parents, teachers, and administrators would have to face the truth in front of witnesses. The school board tried to refuse. This is inflammatory, counterproductive. Caleb's response was simple. Then I'll hold it myself. I'll rent a venue. I'll invite the media. I'll make sure every family in this district sees what you've been hiding. Your choice, participate officially or watch it happen anyway. They chose to participate. The forum was scheduled for a Tuesday evening at the Central Library's community room. Neutral ground. In the 2 weeks leading up to it, Caleb received threats. His company's Yelp page was bombed with 1-star reviews. Someone slashed his tires. A brick went through his home office window with a note, "Leave Oakwood alone." Imani asked him one night, voice small, "Daddy, are we doing the right thing?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "What do you think?" She was quiet for a long moment, then, I think sometimes doing the right thing is scary. And expensive. And makes people mad at you. But it's still right." "Where did you learn that?" "From you," she said simply. "And from Mommy's prayers." She meant her bedtime prayers, but Caleb heard something else. Keisha's prayers, Keisha's fight, continuing through her daughter. The night of the forum arrived. The community room was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, media cameras in the back, school board members at a table in front, looking grim. Principal Lockridge sat in the first row, his face a mask of professional concern. Darlene Whitcomb sat near the middle, surrounded by other teachers. Caleb and Imani entered together. The room fell silent. Every eye tracked them to their seats. The school board president called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to discuss concerns raised by Mr. Caleb Thornton regarding practices at Oakwood Elementary. Mr. Thornton, you have the floor." Caleb stood. Didn't look at his notes. He'd lived this story for months now. "My name is Caleb Thornton. 2 years ago I adopted an 8-year-old girl named Imani. I thought I was giving her a safe home and a good education. What I gave her was a front-row seat to the same systematic discrimination that killed her biological mother 21 years ago." Gasps rippled through the audience. Lockridge sat forward sharply. Caleb continued. Imani's mother, Keisha Thornton, worked as a teacher's aide at Oakwood Elementary in 2004. She documented the same patterns I've documented now. Different treatment based on race. Dismissal of minority students' complaints. Protection of white children, while children of color were labeled as problems. Keisha was preparing to present her findings to this very school board. She died in a hit-and-run 2 weeks before that presentation. Her documentation disappeared. He pulled out a stack of papers. "I have her original notes, found in storage by a friend who's kept them safe for 21 years. Waiting for someone to finish what Keisha started." Ruth Ann Sear stood up in the audience. "I'm that friend, and I'm ready to testify to everything I witnessed." The room erupted. The board president banged his gavel. "Order! We will have order!" Caleb waited for silence. Then he began presenting evidence. Not just from Imani's case, but from 15 families spanning 20 years. A pattern so clear, so documented, that denial became impossible. He showed the spreadsheet comparing how complaints were handled based on student race, showed the incident reports with their dismissive language, showed emails from teachers using coded language about cultural fit and family expectations. Tanya Reeves stood. "My son Marcus came home crying 3 times last week. Each time he begged me not to say anything because it would make things worse. What kind of message are we sending our children when staying quiet feels safer than speaking up? Other parents began standing, sharing stories, adding their voices to the chorus of testimony that had been silenced for so long. Then Darlene Whitcomb did something nobody expected. She stood up, walked slowly to the microphone. Her face was pale, tears already streaming. "I need to say something." Her voice cracked. "I failed your daughter." She looked directly at Imani. "I failed all these children." The room went completely silent. "I saw what was happening," Darlene continued, tears flowing freely now. "Every day I saw it, but I told myself it wasn't that bad, that speaking up would cause more problems, that keeping the peace was more important than—" Her voice broke completely. "I chose my comfort over their dignity, and I have to live with that." She turned to the school board. "We talk about inclusion in our newsletters. We hang posters about kindness in our hallways. But when real moments come, moments when we could stand up for these values," she wiped her eyes. "I chose silence. We all chose silence. And children suffered because we were more concerned about our reputations than their humanity." The confession hung in the air like a breaking wave. Even the media cameras seemed to pause in respect for this moment of raw honesty. Principal Lockridge remained seated, his face carefully blank. But Caleb saw his hands trembling slightly on the table. The school board president cleared his throat. "Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Whitcomb. This board will take all testimony under serious consideration." "No." The voice was small but clear. Imani had stood up, 8 years old, in her yellow dress with the butterfly pattern, facing a room of 200 adults. "No?" The board president looked confused. "No more just taking it under consideration," Imani said, her voice growing stronger. "No more monitoring the situation. No more telling kids to try harder to fit in." She looked at the board members one by one. "I don't want to be the last kid who has to pray every night for courage to go to lunch. I don't want to be special. I want every kid to be safe. That's not special treatment, that's just right." Caleb felt his throat tighten. His daughter, his brave daughter, doing what her mother had tried to do. Speaking truth to power. "My daughter doesn't need special treatment," Caleb said, standing beside Imani. "Every child in this school deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves to be seen and heard. That's not special treatment. It's basic human dignity." The superintendent, who'd been silent until now, stood. "Mr. Thornton, I want to be clear. We've initiated a full investigation based on the materials you've provided. Our preliminary findings are troubling." She pulled out a folder. "As of this morning, we've received Principal Gerald Lockridge's resignation letter. We're bringing in an independent review board to examine all disciplinary and incident reports from the past 10 years. And we're announcing mandatory cultural competency training for all staff, monthly parent oversight meetings, and clear reporting procedures for bias-related incidents." Lockridge's face went white. Around the room, teachers shifted uncomfortably. "Additionally," the superintendent continued, "we'll be conducting a complete review of how we've handled past complaints. Any staff member found to have deliberately dismissed or buried legitimate concerns will face disciplinary action up to and including termination." This was it. Not everything, not complete justice, but acknowledgement, action, change. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Parents asked questions. Board members outlined next steps. Committees were formed. Oversight structures proposed. Through it all, Imani sat quietly beside her father, her hand in his. Not victorious, not triumphant. Just present, witnessed, finally seen. As people filed out, several parents approached them. Some apologized. Others thanked them. A few still looked angry, unconvinced. Darlene Whitcomb came last, She knelt down in front of Imani. "I'm so sorry," she said simply. "You deserved better, and I promise you, I'm going to do better. Not just say it, do it." Imani looked at her teacher for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." Not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement that change was possible, that people could choose differently. Walking to their car that night, Caleb asked, "How do you feel, sweetheart?" Imani was quiet for several steps. Then, "Tired, but lighter? Like I've been carrying something heavy and I can finally put it down." "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," Caleb said, "and neither does any other child at that school." But the story didn't end there. Because individual justice is one thing, systemic change is another entirely. Over the next 3 months, the investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. It wasn't just Oakwood Elementary. It was a pattern across the entire district. Schools with predominantly white populations showing the same dismissive treatment of minority students, the same coded language in incident reports, the same protective culture around staff who maintained the status quo. The review board found that over a 15-year period, not a single teacher had been disciplined for bias-related incidents. 0. Despite dozens of complaints, despite documented evidence, despite patterns that should have triggered intervention years ago, they found that wealthy white parents had essentially captured the school board through donations and fundraising. That schools competed for these families by maintaining an environment that catered to their comfort, even when that comfort came at the cost of other children's dignity. They found budget allocations that heavily favored schools in wealthy neighborhoods while underfunding schools with more diverse populations. Resources flowing to where complaints came from parents with lawyers and connections, while complaints from marginalized families went into files and died there. The investigation revealed a machine. Not a conspiracy of individuals, but a system designed to protect itself by protecting the people who fed it money and political support. Imani's case became a catalyst, but it was just the beginning. Local news became national news. Civil rights organizations got involved. The Department of Justice opened an investigation into the district's civil rights compliance. Parents organized across the district, forming coalitions that crossed racial and economic lines. Within 6 months, 3 principals resigned or were removed. The school board was recalled and replaced with new members committed to reform. A district-wide equity audit was conducted. New anti-bias training became mandatory for all staff. An independent oversight committee with real enforcement power was established. Funding formulas were restructured to address historical inequities, but the cost was real too. Caleb's business suffered. Clients pulled contracts. Investors backed away. The attention, the controversy, it all had consequences. His net worth dropped from $43 million to $28 million in a year. His social life evaporated. Invitations stopped. Friends distanced themselves. He became that parent who couldn't let things go, who made everything about race, who ruined a good school. Imani's experience improved at school, but she was marked now. Some children's parents told them to stay away from that girl who caused all the trouble. Some teachers treated her carefully, walking on eggshells, which was its own form of isolation. The changes were real, but they came with a price. One evening, 6 months after the forum, Caleb found Imani in her room, working on a school assignment. The prompt was, "Write about what courage means to you." She showed him what she'd written. "Dear friend, I used to think being brave meant not being scared. I thought being kind meant always smiling, even when things hurt inside. But I learned something important this year. Sometimes being brave means telling the truth when your voice shakes. Sometimes it means standing still when you want to run away. And sometimes it means letting other people be brave with you. My daddy taught me that kindness isn't just about being nice. Real kindness means seeing when something is wrong and helping fix it, not just for yourself, but for everybody, even when it's hard. I pray every night, and God helps me be strong. But he also sent me people who stand beside me. Like Ruth Ann, who saves me a seat at lunch and smiles at me like she really sees me. Like my new friends who ask about my food instead of making fun of it. And most of all, like my daddy, who taught me that love means fighting for what's right. I learned that sometimes you have to let your heart be brave before your mind stops being scared. And that's okay, because bravery isn't about not having fear. It's about doing what's right anyway. Now when I say grace at lunch, I pray out loud. I'm not ashamed of who I am anymore. And I think that's what kindness and bravery really mean. Helping everyone feel safe to be themselves. Love, Imani. Caleb read it 3 times, blinking back tears. His daughter had learned lessons no 8-year-old should have to learn. But she'd learned them with grace, with faith, with a wisdom that shamed most adults. "Can I keep this?" he asked. Imani nodded. "I made an extra copy for Ms. Thompson. This one's for you." Caleb placed the letter in a leather folder in his desk drawer, next to the few documents they'd recovered from Keisha's case. Mother and daughter, 21 years apart, fighting the same fight with the same courage. That Sunday, Caleb and Imani went to the Hope Community Center. This had become their routine. Every Sunday afternoon, volunteering. Helping other families navigate systems that were designed to grind them down. Imani was different here. Confident, outgoing. She moved through the center, helping younger children with homework, teaching them to braid friendship bracelets, sharing her story when it helped someone else feel less alone. Caleb watched her show a nervous 6-year-old how to make a bracelet. "It's okay if you mess up," Imani was saying. "Sometimes we have to undo things to make them right. Here, let me help you start again." Mrs. Martinez, the center's director, came to stand beside Caleb. "Your daughter has such a beautiful spirit. The other children naturally gravitate to her." "She's teaching me more than I could ever teach her," Caleb replied. "Being brave isn't about being strong all by yourself," Imani's voice carried across the room as she worked with the younger children. "It's about helping others find their strength too." The afternoon light painted the community center in warm gold. Children's laughter mixed with quiet conversations. Volunteers sorted donated supplies. Families helped each other navigate paperwork, share resources, build networks of support. This was the work that mattered, Caleb realized. Not just changing one school or one policy, but building communities where people looked out for each other, where individual battles became collective action, where the next child facing injustice wouldn't have to start from zero, because others had paved the way. As the afternoon wound down, Imani gathered the children for a closing circle. They held hands, heads bowed. "Dear God," Imani's voice was clear and strong. "Thank you for this beautiful day, and for all our new friends. Thank you for teaching us that love is stronger than fear, and that every person deserves to be treated with kindness. Help us remember to be brave, not just for ourselves, but for others too. And thank you for showing us that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions. Amen." "Amen," the circle echoed. Caleb watched his daughter. This child who'd survived 7 foster homes, who'd lost her mother to a fight for justice, who'd endured months of systematic cruelty disguised as social adjustment, who'd found the courage to stand up and demand better, not just for herself, but for everyone. She was whole, not unscathed, but whole. The system hadn't broken her. It had revealed her strength. As they drove home that evening, Imani hummed along to the radio. Then, out of nowhere, "Daddy, Do you think Mommy would be proud? Caleb's throat tightened. Your birth mother? Yeah, Miss Ruth Ann told me about her, about how she tried to make things better at the school. I think, Caleb said carefully, that your mother would be incredibly proud. You finished what she started. Imani was quiet for a moment. I think maybe that's why God put us together. So her fight didn't end, so someone could finish it. The simple faith in her voice, the quiet certainty that her life had purpose, that her suffering had meaning. It destroyed him and remade him all at once. Maybe you're right, sweetheart. And Daddy? Her voice grew softer. Thank you for not making me leave, for fighting instead of running. You taught me to fight, Caleb said. Your courage made me brave. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the evening light painting everything in gold. Let me ask you something. How many Imanis are sitting in schools right now, praying for someone to see them? How many children are learning that silence is safer than truth? How many parents are being told their concerns are overreactions? Their children are too sensitive. Their complaints are making things worse. How many Keishas have been silenced before they could finish their fight? The system that tried to break Imani isn't unique to Oakwood Elementary. It's everywhere. In schools that claim color blindness while disciplining black children at 3 times the rate of white children. In workplaces that tout diversity while systematically underpaying and undervaluing employees of color. In institutions that celebrate inclusion in their mission statements while protecting the status quo in their actual practices. The machine runs on silence, on isolated families fighting alone, on parents who don't have the resources or support to challenge the system, on the belief that if you just try hard enough to fit in, if you just make yourself small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough, eventually you'll be safe. But Imani proved something different. She proved that safety doesn't come from silence, it comes from truth, from documentation, from communities standing together, from refusing to let injustice hide behind polite language and professional smiles. She proved that an 8-year-old girl with faith and a father who believed her could change a system that had protected itself for 21 years. So let me ask you, have you seen this? Have you witnessed it? A child who suddenly stops talking about school, who brings home full lunchboxes, who flinches at questions about friends, who prays for courage instead of joy. A colleague whose good ideas are ignored until a white coworker says them. A neighbor whose legitimate complaints are dismissed as overreactions. A friend who's exhausted from being the only one in their space. Have you been that child? That colleague? That neighbor? That friend? Drop your story in the comments. Because every story matters. Every witness counts. Every voice that refuses to stay silent weakens the machine. Share this story. Not the sanitized version. The real version. The one that makes people uncomfortable because discomfort is the price of change. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. Systems don't change because people in power suddenly develop consciences. They change because enough voices get loud enough that silence becomes more expensive than action. Imani's mother learned that the hard way. Imani learned it too. But the difference is that Imani didn't fight alone. She had her father, she had Ruth Ann, she had Tanya and Maria and James and Sandra. She had a community that grew around her courage until the truth couldn't be buried anymore. You have that same power. To see, to witness, to document, to stand with the Imanis in your world who are praying someone will notice their pain. The question is, will you subscribe to channel? Because every child deserves to pray for joy, not courage. Every family deserves justice, not just survival. Every system that protects prejudice over people deserves to be exposed and dismantled. Stay just, stay loud, stay free. And remember Imani Thornton, 8 years old, former foster child, adopted daughter, survivor of systematic discrimination, and the girl who proved that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. Her mother's fight wasn't finished in 2004, but it's not over now either, because systems like the one at Oakwood Elementary still exist, still operate, still grind down children who deserve better. The only question is, will you be the one who sees, who acts, who refuses to let another child sit alone at lunch while adults scroll through their phones? Will you be the Ruth Ann who finally speaks up? The Caleb who uses privilege to amplify truth? The Tanya who keeps receipts until the day someone's ready to listen? Or will you be one more person who looks away, who thinks it's not that bad, who chooses comfort over justice? Imani made her choice at 8 years old. She chose truth over safety, courage over invisibility, justice over peace. What will you choose? The machine is still running, but it runs on silence, and silence, it turns out, is a choice too.